Woohoo. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matty Taus, and if you don't know me, it's a good chance it's because you're our guest this morning. And I'll be honest with you, this is probably the very best week you could have ever chosen to be our guest. So well done, you. You're already winning this morning. Well played. But the reason that I say that is because what we're going to be doing for the next couple of weeks is really digging into why we are the way that we are. Both why Epiphany Station exists the way that it does and why it operates the way that it does, but then also why we seek to have people live out their faith in a certain way, a tangible, specific way. So if you were checking Epiphany out because you're wondering what's going on, or you're maybe looking for a home church, or you just wanted to kind of give it that one chance, one shot, I'm really happy that you chose to make it this weekend. So we really have a good opportunity for you to make a good decision about if you want to be here, if you want to call this your church or not. So fuel, as fuel is a opportunity, or an opportunity, if you took English, an opportunity for us to really look at what drives us and how we can make sure that what it is that we've been called to do, that we have both the capacity and the drive and the fuel to make sure we're going to go and do it. So we're actually going to go and get it. If you were around Epiphany this same time last year, if you called Epiphany Station home back then, you might remember myself and our founding pastor, Jeff Gauss, sitting and talking for a few weeks about fuel and about the vision that we believe God has given us and what he wants us to really go and get after. And it was soon after that Jeff went and planted Grand City Station in Grand Forks. But what we wanted to do for these next 2 weeks is to take the time yet again to revisit what it is we're called to go and accomplish, called to go and do specifically, so that we're all on the same page. So this week, we're going to talk about the why Epiphany Station exists, why we have the mission that we do, the vision that we do, and the way that we do things as well. Maybe give you some answers to that. And then next week, I'm going to boldly set before you the plan and what it is going to take for us to see the plan happen and to get it done. So if you want the why and the how, then make sure you're here for the next couple of weeks as we walk through fuel together. So let's start with the why. Why does there need to be a clear mission or a clear vision for how we do church and how we do faith? I think it's one of the timeless questions when it comes to Christianity or it comes to any kind of religion is, what is it supposed to look like when it's done right? Or what is it supposed to look like when it's done well? There's so many different varieties and versions of it could be like this or it could be like that we sometimes get a little bit messed in the head of what a certain thing teaches or what it's supposed to drive a person towards. How, if I want to have any kind of relationship with God, how do I do that? Honestly, how do I go about pursuing that? Or if I don't want a relationship with him, what should I expect from a Jesus follower? What should I expect from a Christian? And what can I see in some people and just know that that's not them following Jesus no matter what they say? Also, as a church, as a family, how do we know what we're supposed to do together? How we're supposed to get about doing ministry and doing worship and our worship experiences and serving the people? What is that all about? What's the right way to do it? So that's where we have to begin, is what is the mission of the church? Because if we don't start and ever have that conversation, never ask that question, the gravitational pull of everything is selfishness. Like, if you're unintentional about life, naturally you're going to want to do what you want to do for yourself, no one else. That's just generally who we are. And it's the same with following God, and it's the same with church. If we don't have a clear vision, a lens to look through, naturally my following of God will just kind of more look like how I want to follow him, rather than maybe how I should be. And our church will start to look like a bunch of people doing church the way that they want to, rather than how we should be. So that's what we're going to be digging into. So we don't become elitist Christians. So we don't become a country club. So we can actually be who we're supposed to be. So we'll start off with the mission of Epiphany Station. And the mission of Epiphany Station is to love God. That was pathetic. The mission of Epiphany Station is to love God, love people, period. This could be your first week, and there's a good chance you already know that because we make a really big deal about it. That is the mission. That is what we all yelled too loud and made a baby cry. How do you feel about yourselves? This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to love God, love people, period. That is what we believed as the church was founded, as it began in the living room, as our lead pastor Jeff asserted what it is we're going to do. Love God, love people, period. As long as Epiphany Station exists, that will be the mission. And we didn't make it up. Jeff didn't make it up. We, in fact, stole it. We stole it from the Bible. Shh. Because when Jesus was asked, how are we supposed to do this, Jesus? When really asked by those who really thought they already knew, kind of like the religious elite, the scholars, they were like, all right, Jesus, you're so smart with your blonde hair and blue eyes. How would you say we're supposed to do faith or church or any of it? What would you say? To which Jesus responds, we have it recorded by the historian Matthew, and he says in chapter 22 of his book, in verse 36, it says, Teacher, what's the most important commandment in the law of Moses? How is it supposed to be done? Jesus replied, you must, not if you wish, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. That's the greatest thing you could ever do with your life in regards to relationship with God and doing it that way, is to give those three things to Him, heart, mind, and soul. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law, all of the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. So what he said is, look, you scholars, you read the law and you read the Old Testament. You basically take the Bible and you squeeze it and you try and juice it for what we're supposed to be doing. If you did that, if you took all of it, what should fall out is love God, love people. The essence of faith is loving God and loving people with everything you've got. So both personally, as we endeavor to have a relationship with God, it is about loving Him. It is about learning how to love Him. It is about choosing to love Him even when we don't feel like it. It's about loving people. It's about choosing to go after that and make that your mission in life. And I'm going to love people. It doesn't matter who they are. That's what I'm going to do. And together, as a group, as a family, that's our mission. That's our challenge. As a group of people who want to do that, we gather together. We gather our resources, our time, and our energy, and we seek to love God together. And we seek to love people together. Now, love God, love people seems amazingly simple. It is not. That is a deceptive notion. The idea of loving God and loving people, although on the essence and the basis of it sounds like, yeah, I can do that. I can love God. Sure, I can love people. Have you ever tried doing it? It's really difficult. Loving God and loving people is tough work. In fact, I believe it is the most difficult mission you could ever have. It's the most difficult way of life you could ever choose to do. Talk about loving God. Sure, I can love God the same way that He loves me. We can have that kind of give and take relationship. What a load of nonsense. It is really difficult to try in any way, shape, or form, try and reflect back to God the magnitude of love He has for us. For all of the forgiveness, for all of the grace, for all of the sacrifice, for us to love Him, and heck, to love Him by changing our lives, to love Him by the way that we make decisions, by the way that we think with our mind and love with our heart and choose to worship with our soul. That's not easy. And then there's loving people. People are generally jerks. It's not easy to love people. 9 times out of 10, 90% of people are always jerks, all the time. 9 times out of 10, 90% of the time. The problem with loving people is the same with problem with loving God. It's all well and good when you're all in a good place and you're just jazzed up to do it. What about when you don't want to? Like, honestly, you don't want to love God. Or you don't want to love people. Doing that, choosing to do that, is the most difficult thing you could ever endeavor to do. It is not simplistic. It is the height and the pinnacle of doing life and doing faith. And another reason it's difficult to love God and to love people and to keep that your focus is there are so many other things you could be doing. In your personal life, there's so many other things that you could choose to make a priority and start being added on to, well, yeah, I'm here to love God and love people and play frisbee golf. That's me, man, right there. But there are literally things we add on, other commandments of this is who I am. Not just a lover of God, not just a lover of people, but we add things on. We want to make it more complicated. In any relationship, we tend to make it more complicated than it is. And we add all these different things on. It becomes hazy. And it happens with churches all the time. You can go to church and it does not look like they're there to love God and love people. You can be part of a church and one day realize, hey, we're not really doing the love God, love people thing. Because there's so many good things that churches can do. That when we don't have that streamlined laser focus to love God, love people, all of the good things get added to the list of why we exist. Now, love God, love people is the engine. It is the engine that drives faith. It is the engine that drives church. And there are two ways to go about it. You can create a vehicle and try and jam the engine in and make it fit and make it connect. And that's how we tend to live life in a way that doesn't really go about the main priority things. Or you can start with the engine and then build everything else outwards. Build everything else based on that. And that's what we're here to try and do. We're currently building a facility on Main Avenue. And that, honestly, the plans for that Main Avenue facility, they have changed a ridiculous amount of times. More times than my accent. I'm actually French. And the reason that they have changed so much is because we want to make sure that the vehicle is based on the engine. So if something looks like it doesn't fit, when it's like, oh, don't worry, we'll jam it in and we'll make it work. No, we've changed it. We want it to be right. When it comes to our staff, we morph and change our roles and our titles and our pay and all these things all the time because we want to make sure that everything we're pouring resource into fits around the mission and is supporting the mission. Even our recovery ministries and children's ministries and youth ministries and worship and our preaching, all of it has to come around this main point of we want to love God and love people, period, and we want to help people do that. We want to help people love God and we want to help people love people. And if anything we do isn't doing that, we need to kill it and we need to scrap it and we need to change it to make sure that the engine is the most important thing that we do. Now, through that lens, through that engine, we then build our vehicle. Our vehicle is the thing that is going to move us, that we are going to move along to make sure that we are directing this engine, directing this power, directing this mission in the right place. Our vehicle is our vision. Now, the vision of Epiphany Station is to reach thousands of outsiders. It's to reach thousands of outsiders with this love God, love people engine. That is the purpose of why we exist. Now, the big thing about that is, immediately, as you should notice, the existence of our faith and the existence of our church is not for ourselves. It is not for me. I am here to love God, love people, and connect God to people he's not yet connected to, and connect people to the God they're not connected to. That's our vision, to go after people who don't love God, who don't even think they want to love God, and to give them a place where that can be challenged. We're not in the business of making people more saved and trying to squeeze them further into heaven. Instead, we intentionally want to be about outsiders, people who don't feel like they have a place to belong. Now, in our context, Thief River Falls, Minnesota, the greatest town on the face of the earth. Yeah, when it's not winter. So for 3 months of the year. That's where we live. Or around the area. Pennington, Marshall, Polk. This is our chunk of the world. The context that we live in is there are a ridiculous number, percentage-wise, of people who feel like outsiders, who feel like they don't belong. Would you do me a favor? Would you put your hand up if you moved to Thief? You weren't born here, you weren't raised here, but you found yourself here and you really don't know why, but you're here. Big percentage in this room. And what's the same about Thief River is the same as my hometown, Malton, in North Yorkshire, England, is if you are not from there, it's really difficult to feel like you belong. It's a tough nut to crack. It's tough to feel like that your family, feel like you're welcome, feel like you're accepted. You feel like an outsider, and it can last a long time. So the vision that God gave us, that gave Epiphany Station, that gave Jeff, was that we're the church for them. We're the church to go after the people who no one else is going after. To go after the people that don't have home, that don't have family, that don't have community, that don't have love. That's why we exist. That's their vehicle. And the way that we do that, the way that we go after outsiders, is not to say, hey, come and fit in. We say, come and belong. We intentionally do not want this to be a place where people feel that they have to change something to come here. That they have to square something away, that they have to tidy it up, that they have to hide the tattoos and not smoke in the parking lot. No, come here because we are all a massive bunch of misfits. There are more misfits here than on Misfit Island in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer classic version, not remastered. This is Misfit Central. In your row, behind you, in front of you, standing up here, massive misfits, people who don't feel like they fit in. That's intentional. We want to provide a place where people can belong before they feel like they deserve it. Where people can call Epiphany Station home before they believe everything we believe. Before they've fit into this unimaginable mold that has sometimes been portrayed for them to fit into. So how do we do that? How do we intentionally make sure that we're a church for outsiders? That we're doing the things for them, not for us? Well, thankfully, we have an amazing example. One of the greatest church planters, one of the greatest pastors there is, who was all about the outsider. There's a guy called Paul. And Paul made it his life's mission to be for the outsider. Going wherever he went, going after everyone he could. People inside, people outside, but just kind of laying it down is, I'm here for all people to do whatever I can. And we have recorded a letter that he wrote to someone explaining this, explaining why he does it, explaining how he does it. And quite frankly, this is where we model our vision. This is where we model the vehicle of Epiphany Station from. So in the letter 1 Corinthians in chapter 9, verse 17, it starts out saying, Paul says to the people, look, if I were doing this on my own initiative, I would deserve payment. But I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. He opens it up, this section, by saying to them, look, I'm not planting churches. I'm not leading worship services. I'm not a pastor because I want to. I'm doing it because I must. I'm doing it because I've been told to. It is not my initiative, and therefore it is not going to be for myself that I'm going to do any of this. He continues on to say, look, what is then my pay? My pay is simply the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That's why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news. And then he goes into how he actually lives that out. He says, even though I'm a free man with no master, I've become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with Jews, I lived like a Jew so I could bring Jews to Christ. When I was with those who were all about the Jewish law and they lived under the law, I would do it too. Even though I'm not subject to it, I would do it too so that I could show them who Jesus Christ was. Verse 21 says, when I'm with Gentiles, those who don't believe the Jewish law, and they don't follow it, I too live apart from the law so I can bring them to Christ. I don't ignore the law. I do it and I obey the law of Christ. When I'm with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. Paul had this attitude of doing his faith and doing church in a way that he would do everything he could to save some. Everything he could change, everything he could manipulate, everything that he could work on in of himself, he would shift it to be able to reach more people with the message of Christ. He would remove barriers. He would remove roadblocks. He would remove, the t-shirts that say, I am such and such. He would never post on Facebook about his political views because that's helpful. But what Paul's attitude was to go into any context and meet them where they're at. Not to lie, not to shape shift and be a chameleon, but say, look, we have more in common than we have different. And the greatest thing we have in common is Jesus Christ. And that's how he would do it. So personally for us, this idea of being for outsiders, not just a church for outsiders, but believers for outsiders, should affect the way we go to work. It should affect the way that we raise and discipline our children. It should affect the way that we treat a waitress. And it should affect the way that we post on Facebook. Corporately, together as a family and as a church, it affects the way we want to create a new facility. A facility that can maybe welcome people so they don't have to come in and sit on the floor. That seems like a welcoming thing to do. I think Paul would do that. It's why we create the worship experiences the way we do. It's why in our messages we speak to people who don't believe what we believe, but we want to meet them where we're at. And one interesting thing, it's why we use the stanchions along the side. We put the stanchions up along the side so when new people tend to come, guests, they tend to come a little bit later than everyone else. We don't pop those until after the welcome. We ask everyone else to sit in the middle so that our guests, when they arrive at the back, they're not doing this to try and find a seat. Everything we can. It's that pedantic. We do everything we can to make an outsider feel welcome when they come here. It's why we want to create a community with a reputation that it cares, a reputation that it serves, a reputation that it loves, and a reputation, quite frankly, that we have a faith worth having. A faith that does something, that is active, that changes lives. That's the vehicle that fulfills the mission. So when you tie those two things together, the mission of Epiphany Station to love God, love people, period, and you put that in the vehicle that we're going to take that to whoever we can. We're going to take that for the outsiders, the ones that no one else is going after. You now know why Epiphany Station exists. You now know why we do everything the way that we do it. If you were to question why we do anything, that's pretty much our first answer. And the challenge to us always is that our first answer? Because if it's not, we need to kill it and change it and move forward and do something different. And the reason that we've existed so long with keeping that our mission and keeping that our vision and keeping that laser focus is it works. It works. Funny that we do what God told us to do by loving him and loving people and following the very specific mission he gave us, and he's having it work. And the reason that we know that it works is because you're sat here this morning. The reason we know that it works is this started with 16 people in the living room. The reason we know it exists is it works is we're already expanding and already kind of blowing out the capacity of this space too. But the main reason that we know that it works is because it is seeing people who do not have a relationship with God start a relationship with God. And do not know that they are loved, realizing that they're loved. And do not knowing that they can be saved and that they can be rescued and that they can be freed, finding all those things. We sometimes ask, and we sometimes quite frankly pressure and demand some people to record their testimony, what's happened to them since engaging with God or Epiphany Station, about visiting for the first time or for making a life-changing decision. And that's how we know it works, is because these stories exist. One of those such stories is from Pamela Lill, and I'd like to show you that right now.
Hi, I'm Pamela Lill. I was born and raised in a Catholic home, and that's how I raised my children. About 6 years ago, I lost my faith with God. I had given up on any beliefs I had. I fell into drinking, and that became a daily occurrence for me. And with that came with a lot of law, a lot of trouble, and I had hit my rock bottom. And then I was in recovery, and things just were not getting better. And one weekend I had planned to end my life because I didn't think I could keep fighting anymore in recovery, feeling so empty and not be able to forgive myself for breaking up my family unit. And Sunday morning I decided to go church, and I thought of another fellowship guy who was in recovery with me, who had a horrible story of what he went through. And his story included taking lives of a family member, or not his family members, but a family. And I don't know what pushed me, but I decided to go to Epiphany that Sunday. And my first service, I was greeted as a stranger with smiley, shaking hands, everybody greeting you. I just felt so good that they didn't even know me, and that's how they approached me. They played this video of this individual that I was just thinking of that morning, because I thought of this individual as I was getting ready for the day, thinking, how he's so happy. How can he be happy and forgive himself? So next thing you know, they play the video, and it is the same individual. And he's right. Epiphany gives you family and so much spirit, and it fills your soul. And when I seen him, that had to be a God thing. It had to be. I was just thinking of him that morning, and I've been hooked on Epiphany since. I have gotten my spirituality back. I have gotten myself back. I know who I am now, and I know what I need to do, and I know who I want to be. And I'm so glad that God did not give up on me. And I'm not going to give up on him, and I'm going to continue to serve him and do what he wants me to do in my life. And I'm still clean and sober, and I just thank God every day that I found Epiphany that morning. I'm Pamela Lill, and this is my Epiphany.
The amazing thing about Pamela's story is that it's not unique. And the reason that she made Epiphany home was by listening to my Epiphany from my friend Paul. And it was my friend Paul that shared his testimony and his story of what's happened to him since he really engaged in his relationship with God and learned how to love God and learn how to love people. It's not unique. To the point that as of January 29th, in the year prior to that, we'd seen 120 people make life-altering decisions to love God and to love people. And since then, we've seen 18 more. We baptized 26 people last year, and on March 19th, we're going to baptize 30 more. There's an insane thing happening. It's a weird thing that people are sitting here, 330 people on a weekend, sitting in a movie theater to do church. 189 individual people have serving roles. They get to work to do something at Epiphany Station or through Epiphany Station. Over the last 6 years, we've been able to raise from our own pockets over 95 grand to serve different social services or fight injustices, what we call My Christmas Epiphany. Those things don't just happen. They happen because of intentionality. They happen because we have a mission and we have a vision. And they happen because it's fueled. They happen because people are willing to make the mission and the vision their own. And this right now, this is the age that we live in which God seeks to work through you. And he seeks to work through me and take these people like me and Pamela and Paul and use us to do something. We are the fuel that powers the vehicle. We are the ones that jump on board and then we start pushing. Less of we put you in the engine and set you on fire. Now, if you've ever had the humbling experience of running your engine dry and running out of gas, you know what it is like to not have the fuel to support the vehicle. And here's the thing, our vehicle is growing. The engine is growing. The vehicle is growing. All of it. And to fuel that, quite frankly, we need more people to be willing to call it their mission and to call it their vision. This is the age of the church. This is the age in which we are the fuel. We are the thing that God wants to use to make this, to continue this, to better this. So Fuel, the series, is a challenge. It is a challenge for you to decide whether you are here for the ride or you're here to support the mission. Whether you're here to sit in the back seat or you're in the back pushing. So this is your challenge. The challenge is to take these 3 next steps. Every week we have next steps, things we want you to do to proactively get after. The first next step is to get on mission. If you're here and we start talking about loving God and loving people, and talking about going and talking to people who don't yet know Jesus, and really talking to people about going after outsiders, and serving and doing something and being active, if that's your thing, you probably belong here, along with the other misfit toys. This is probably where you're supposed to be. So make it your home. Call Epiphany Station your home. Get active. Do something. Whatever questions you need answered, come and ask them. But if it doesn't seem to click with you, that's totally okay. And here's where I need to be honest. It is not our purpose, the leadership of Epiphany or any of you, to judge the way anyone does their faith. The way that any other church does church. The way that any other believer does believer. That's not your job. Our job is to judge ourselves and see if we're doing it. But if you don't feel like Epiphany Station is your thing, this thing's just not clicking for you, you probably belong somewhere else. You probably belong at a different church with different people who are fired up about a different thing. And that's okay. It's not a lesser faith. I would love, if you feel that today, I'd love to sit down with you and talk to you about the other churches in town. In a good way. Surprisingly, pastor doing that. But I would love to talk to you about their leaders and talk to you about what they're fired up about, what they're juiced up about, and see if we can find the church home that is right for you. Because the very worst thing is to be on for a ride in a direction you don't want to go. It's called kidnapping, and we don't want to do that. So don't feel the pressure to stay here just to stay here. If this is not right for you, come and talk to me. I would love to find the place for you that is. But if this is your thing, welcome, and you may never leave. But if this is your thing, if this is where you're supposed to be, then get on mission. You now know it. You know the mission. You know the vision. Get to work. Get involved. The second thing is to get prepared. If you are here and you do want to be here and you want to do something, you have to prepare yourself for a shift. A shift from being served to doing the serving. With your faith, if you're just started out in your faith, you started a relationship with God, quite frankly, there's a lot of focus that gets put on you. A lot of investment to make sure you start your relationship with God and it starts growing and thriving. But at a certain point, and it's usually a lot sooner than we think, we have to make the mental shift to now know it's my job to live for others. It's my job to love my God and to love the people that don't know Him yet and the people that do. And to connect as many of them as we can. So we shift away from the thing that attracted us here. The thing that we loved when we walked in and we were greeted and we were served coffee and we were led in worship and led in teaching, and start owning the fact that, hey, maybe we could work there. Maybe we could do something with that. Roughly 60% of the people that come to Epiphany work at Epiphany in a magnitude of different roles. You don't have to do everything, but you have to do something. If you call Epiphany Station home, you have to do something. It is the way that the fuel meets the needs of the vehicle. So it could be in our guest services, the thing that you see on a Sunday morning a lot, or in our special events. It could be in worship or production or tech or administration or finance or overseers. It could be leading small groups or teaching or pastoring or praying with people. It could be working on the new facility stuff or maintaining facilities. It could be preparing for our big Easter. It could be preparing for all the other things that we do to serve our community. But everyone does something. And the people who do it and keep doing it know why they do it. And we know why we serve and why we choose to be here. So if you're in the family, guess what? I'm automatically volunteering you to be on the team and to find your place in what you're supposed to do. The final thing is to get the details. To get the details. Next week, we're going to go into the details. Next Sunday morning, we're going to go into the what's next, what it's going to take, who we need, where we need you to make sure that we can do this. Because quite frankly, we need a new facility getting built. We have a youth ministry and a next-gen ministry that is absolutely exploding. We need to do something about that, and quick. We need more staff. We need more people pulling weight and fueling. It's just honesty. And if you want to get the details, I'd love you to be here next week. If you're in a GPS group, I'll be visiting your GPS group this week to talk to you about some of those details. And if you're not in one of those, we'll have a special group in midweek next week in which you can attend that and learn some more of those details. But the mission of Epiphany Station is clear. The call on every one of us that calls it home is to love God, love people, period. It's what we're here to do. And we're here to take that to as many people as we can by doing whatever it takes. The question is, are you ready to get on that mission? My challenge to you is to jump on board. Would you guys please pray with me? Father God, we thank you that you've done something different and you've done something weird that we're not used to through just the foundation of Epiphany Station since before all of us were even here. That you created a place where we could actively engage in loving you and loving people and holding tight to the vision of caring for those and loving those who no one's caring and loving for. I just thank you for that we get to do that even when we don't feel like we want to. And we don't have the motivation for it, but we have a place that encourages us all to do that. I ask for those of us that are here with us today that don't get this, that don't know why we love you and why we want to love people, that they would see something of you through what you've created here. Something of your love through our love, and we would know that we're representing that. Father, I just ask that you will help us all understand what you're calling us to do with our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Just before I hand you over to the team, and I'm running